Chapter 1831. Du Yueshing's eyes darkened as he stared at her deeply. After a long time, he smiled faintly and said, "Mr. Yi is a good idea." She wanted to chase a man and leave the company to him. After that, she could come back and take it. How could he not give it to her? If it were someone else, he would have agreed. But this person was Yi Liangxiu. However, he couldn't reject her. It wasn't because of King Entertainment, but because she said that he could kiss her face. Then he would just kiss her face properly. Also, lips seemed to grow on her face, Du Yueshing thought immorally. If he kissed her, he wondered what Qin Anlin would think when he saw it. Would he be jealous? He looked at her gently. He thought that if Qin Anlin backed down, he wouldn't give up. He would hold Liangxiu's hand tightly and tell her that he wanted her. When Yi Liangxiu left, Du Yueshing sent her all the way to the hotel. When she got in the car, she turned around and looked at him deeply. "Mr. Du, you must have loved someone before." He didn't say anything. Yi Liangxiu looked down and smiled faintly. "Mr. Du, you haven't forgotten about it yet, have you?" His body trembled, and he knew what she meant. She was indeed the woman Qin Anlin liked. She was too smart, and nothing could be hidden from her. With a hoarse voice, he reached out and touched her hair. "You and her are actually different. No one was a substitute." In his eyes, she was still Yi Liangxiu. If they looked alike, then he could find a woman who looked more like her. The reason he was interested in her was probably because of her character. It was pretty good. Yi Liangxiu smiled faintly and didn't say anything else. She got into the car and said goodbye to him. Du Yueshing smiled back and told her that he would see her tonight. But his eyes flashed and he changed his mind. He leaned over and kissed her cheek quickly. Before she could resist, he whispered, "You were the one who said that I could kiss her face." He only kissed her once before straightening up. Yi Liangxiu reached out to touch her face, feeling a little stunned. "Get used to it. Otherwise, I won't be able to convince others." Du Yueshing returned to his gentlemanly appearance. He had always been polite in front of her. As for the accident just now, she also hoped that it was as he said. Yi Liangxiu smiled and slowly drove the car away. When she returned to the apartment, the styling team had already arrived with the latest items of the season. There were more than 10 dresses for her to choose from. Of course, each dress came with matching jewelry, shoes, and bags. Yi Liangxiu took a shower and dried her hair. She felt refreshed and comfortable. His fingers shuttled back and forth between the dresses, and he quickly chose a Dior Starry Sky dress. "Miss Ye's taste is really good. Many socialites and celebrities like this dress very much." The designer smiled and took the dress down. Yi Liangxiu changed and walked slowly to the mirror. The starry sky of the dress was a gradual change. It was supported by 2 very thin shoulder straps. It was very demanding on the figure. The whole dress looked very ethereal, like a little fairy. It also made her look a lot younger, especially with her long hair tied behind her head. She looked very gentle. "This dress is the most suitable for Miss Yi." The stylist couldn't help but exclaim as he helped her put on the water droplet-shaped earrings. Yi Liangxiu smiled slightly. "Really?" She looked at herself and felt a little incredulous. She had given birth to 5 children, yet her waist was so thin. Of course, a certain part of her body was much fuller. Apart from being ethereal, she also looked a little more seductive. Chapter 1832. The banquet was held at the New York branch of the GM Hotel. Tang Yu and Pei Chi were also in New York recently, so they attended the banquet with Xiaoxin. Yi Muyun lived with the Tang family, so he came with them. As soon as he got out of the car, he attracted a lot of reporters. Boyi was a multinational company, ranked in the top 50 in the world. Every move of the president of Boyi was eye-catching, especially since he had no children. Bringing Yi Muyun with him was even more significant. Tang Yu held Pei Chi-Chi's hand, and next to him was his beloved daughter, Tang Sher. On the other side stood the 10-year-old Yi Muyun. He was so young, but he was terrifyingly calm. The reporters frantically asked questions about Yi Muyun's status in the Tang family. One had to know that helping someone raise a child was usually related by marriage. President Tang only had one daughter. Many people guessed that he would be Tang Sher's husband in the future. Faced with the questions, Tang Yu smiled slightly. Mu Yun is President Qin's eldest son, and of course, he is also my favorite successor. His words were like a bomb. After all, a son-in-law and a successor were two completely different identities. The latter, on the other hand, would only marry Tang Shui after being given the highest authority. She would never be an accessory of the Tang family. Mr. Tang, do you have such high hopes for President Qin's child? What if, before she could ask further, Tang Yu smiled and placed his big palm on Yi Mu Yun's little head? There won't be any what if. The child raised by me, Tang Yu, will not be bad. His words were naturally authoritative, and no one dared to refute him. However, Xiaoxin's eyes were filled with tears. It was so scary. She had to be with the little brother cannibal every day. She heard that she could marry the little brother cannibal when she grew up. She did not know why her papa agreed. Anyway, the little brother cannibal had already lived in her house. Sometimes when she stayed in her papa's bed, her papa would directly carry her to the little brother cannibal's bed. She didn't want to. It was so scary. On the first night, she slept with the little cannibal big bro. It was as if he was hugging a doll. When she slept, she could not move at all. If she moved even a little, he would trap her and stare at her like he wanted to eat her alive. She watched the whole night, not daring to cry, not daring to call for her mother. Because her mother was not free, she was bullied by her father. Xiaoxin was as pitiful as Mummy. Would Xiaoxin also be eaten by little older brother? Mummy would cry miserably every time, saying that she did not want it anymore and that it was painful. My heart is afraid of pain. Wah wah wah. Little big brother cannibal did not eat her. He only stared at her for the whole night. The next morning, he seemed especially happy. He cupped her little face and kissed her. It was soft and gentle and quite comfortable. She gathered her courage and asked him if he would eat her little heart. She even threatened him, saying that he would eat her up. There was no one else in the world with such a cute heart. The little brother rubbed her long hair and said that he would eat her when she grew up. He's so bad, but it was safe for the time being. After that, he would sneak into her room every night. Most of the time, he would carry her to his bedroom and hug her to sleep. However, he did not eat her again. At most, he would bite her little face and say that it smelled good. Xiaoxin was not fragrant. If it smelled good, she would be eaten. At this moment, she secretly looked at little older brother. He had a straight face and looked quite similar to her papa. Chapter 1833. At this moment, she sneaked a peek at her little older brother. He had a straight face and looked quite similar to her father. They would probably eat people too. Thinking about how her mother said it hurt, Xiaoxin took another look at Yi Mu Yun. She pouted her little mouth and looked pitiful. Tang Yu calmly brought his wife, daughter, and other people's children into the banquet hall. Pei Chi wasn't dressed formally tonight. She wore a black knee-length dress that Mr. Tang picked out. He said that the color of her dress reminded him of the first time she bumped into him in his room. How could Pei Chi not know what he was thinking? She smiled slightly and didn't accept the interview. It was Tang Yu's decision about Mu Yun, so she felt that Xiaoxin was a little afraid of Mu Yun. Mu Yun combined Anlin and Liangxiu, but instead became Tang Yu. It would be strange if Xiaoxin wasn't afraid. As soon as they entered, Yi Liangxiu came up to them. Yi Mu Yun went up to her and hugged her. "Mommy, happy birthday." As he spoke, he took out a gift. It was the first money he earned under Uncle Tang's guidance to buy a pair of earrings. Yi Liangxiu was quite surprised and kissed him. Yi Mu Yun was a 10-year-old child after all. His little face was a little red when he was praised. When he looked up, he saw Xiaoxin looking at the gift eagerly. He whispered, "Next time, I'll buy it for you." He looked at the little dress she was wearing and thought that he should buy it for her. In the future, she should wear and use the money he earned to buy it. In Uncle Tang's house, not only did he have to earn his own expenses, but he also had to pay for Xiaoxin's life. Of course, he didn't have to use his mother's money, but he earned it himself. Xiaoxin looked at him and softly said, "Xiaoxin, don't." Her voice was crisp and delicate, but Yi Mu Yun thought, how could she be so cute? Even a milky yellow bun had emotions. He smiled indulgently, treating her rejection as nothing. He was too strong, and she was too weak. In the following 10 years, she slowly succumbed to him. What she wore, what she used, what she ate, it was all up to him. He had become her boyfriend, or rather, he was the one who had raised her. Fortunately, he was very busy. Xiaoxin felt that the days he was not at home were like a prisoner on a break. Looking at the pair of children playing around, the adults all laughed. "What are you guys talking about?" a male voice asked. Lianxiu looked up and saw Du Yuesheng walking over. She smiled and said, "We're chatting. Yuesheng, let me introduce you." Tang Yu and Pei Chi looked at each other. Yuesheng? When did they become so close? Did this mean that there was nothing for Qin Anlin to do? While he was deep in thought, Du Yuesheng had already walked over and extended her hand with a smile. "Mr. Tang, it's an honor to meet you. I often hear Lianxiu mention you." Tang Yu also smiled faintly. "It's Lianxiu who thinks too highly of me." He had no intention of introducing Chi to this person. There was no need for it. Pei Chi was also not interested. She just watched from the side. She was thinking, where did Anlin go? His wife was openly going out with someone else, so where was he hiding? He was really calm. Could he forget Lianxiu just because he was with his beautiful secretary? Of course, she didn't believe it. If Anlin could let it go, he would have let it go long ago. Why would he wait until now? But after walking around, there was no one. Chapter 1834. However, she didn't see him after circling around. But that might not be the case. There would be a masquerade ball later, and perhaps he would appear. An arm hooked around her, and then she heard a deep voice. "What are you thinking about?" "I'm thinking about Anlin," Pei Chi said openly, and then her lips were sealed. It was just a light kiss, but she could feel how exasperated Mr. Tang was. Sigh. Anlin already had a few tricks up his sleeves, and he still cared about this. "Don't think about anyone else in the future." Tang Yu's voice was low and hoarse. "I'll teach you a lesson when we get back." Pei Chi hugged his waist and smiled. "I'm going to be taught a lesson anyway. I'll think about it a little more." Tang Yu was furious. She was really becoming less and less afraid of him. She was so shameless. He calmly picked up the wine beside him, took a sip, and looked at her. "It seems that you're not afraid anymore." His dark eyes were filled with a deep jade-like gaze that only she could see. Pei Chi immediately put away her fake smile. "I'm scared, very scared." He snorted, determined to teach her a lesson tonight. But at this moment, his attention was on the stage. "I heard that Lianxiu will announce her engagement with that old man, Du Yuesheng, tonight." Pei Chi stared at him. "You don't seem to be much younger than him." "Pei Chi, your husband is 35, the best age in a man's life." He emphasized. After a pause, he said, "Anlin will come." Pei Chi wasn't so optimistic and shook her head. There was no host for tonight's banquet, and it was a buffet French meal. And Du Yuesheng and Yi Lianxiu had been together the whole time, so it could be considered as an announcement of their relationship. Everyone was guessing, so it wasn't strange. Du Yuesheng had been by Yi Lianxiu's side for a long time in B City. At 10 o'clock, the masquerade ball began. Before Du Yuesheng put on his mask, he hugged and kissed Yi Lianxiu. He did not kiss her face, as she had said. Instead, he hugged her in his arms and gently kissed her lips, although it was not deep enough. It was enough for Xiaohan. No one would suspect that they were just putting on a show. Du Yuesheng's expression was very engrossed. He was a man who was completely immersed in love. Yi Lianxiu was stunned. He then pressed his lips against hers and whispered, "Close your eyes, if you don't want to arouse suspicion." She closed her eyes in a panic. In fact, she felt a little regretful. She should not have provoked Du Yuesheng. He was much more serious than she thought. Du Yuesheng chuckled softly. "You shouldn't have provoked her, but you have already provoked her. Lianxiu, you can't escape." He returned to the hotel and thought for a long time. In the end, he decided not to let go of this opportunity. It didn't matter if it was real or fake. He wanted to make their relationship real. He had taken advantage of the situation. It was a little despicable, but emotions were selfish, weren't they? Qin Anlin. He could only say sorry. Such a kiss lasted for a very, very long time. Because he did not allow her to escape, the seemingly gentle kiss was actually domineering. His hand pressed against her back, not letting her move unless she wanted to tell everyone that they were putting on a show. And he knew the critical point where she would not fall out with him. In the crowd, among the masks, a black shadow stood there, his eyes deep and serene. His slender figure was set off by the fitted suit, making him look particularly tall and straight. He looked at her just like that, his heart aching. He looked at his Liangxiu kissing someone else. Was she very happy now? Chapter 1835. After the kiss, Liangxiu pushed Du Yuesheng away without batting an eyelid. Gritting her teeth, she said, "Mr. Du, that's not what I said previously. Oh, I got carried away. I'm sorry." It was rare for Du Yuesheng to be so shameless. He looked around and smiled. "Also, I think you should call me Yuesheng. Otherwise, I'm afraid of being suspected." Liangxiu glared at him. He couldn't help but laugh. Reaching out, he gently pinched her cheek. "Liangxiu, you'll really be suspected if you do this." With that said, he bent down and planted a light kiss on her lips. He murmured, "We can dance now." He helped her put on the mask and led her off the stage. As he walked, he said, "Do you regret your decision? I forgot to tell you that there's always a price to pay for everything. It's the same tonight." Liangxiu finally came back to her senses. Gritting her teeth, she said, "Du Yuesheng, don't you think it's too much? Compared to what you did to me, I don't think so." He smiled faintly and looked sideways at her. "Liangxiu, the mask you're wearing is very interesting." She reached out to touch it, but couldn't feel anything. Du Yuesheng kindly reminded her, "It's a pretty girl warrior." Pretty girl warrior? Liangxiu's eyes were filled with anger. Luckily, it was blocked by the mask. Du Yuesheng wore an elegant mask and bent down. "It's specially prepared for you. I think it suits you." She wanted to take it off, but if she did so now, she would lose her composure. The dance continued. She was in the crook of his arm. Unexpectedly, Du Yuesheng danced very well. She managed to hold the stage. But even so, she wouldn't forgive his impetuousness today. After the song ended, he stopped, and her body froze as well. The surrounding noise seemed to be calm. The world was so quiet that it seemed like there were only the two of them. Behind a mask, his gaze was deep. "Liangxiu, I'm serious." Her gaze paused and looked straight at him, stunned. "If one day you change your mind, I will be here, waiting for you." His voice had the sensuality of a 40-year-old man, and she wanted to escape. However, he obviously didn't want to scare her. He smiled lightly and said, "If you haven't given up on Amlin, I can accompany you." In any case, he had never met a girl who was more tempted than her. Before Liangxiu could refuse, her waist was wrapped by a strong arm. Then, she bumped into a sturdy body, and her face was buried in a masculine embrace. Fortunately, she had a mask to block it, otherwise it would have been very painful. She was in a daze for a long time. When she looked up, she saw a cold mask. Unlike the others, this was a complete silver mask. It was suffused with a cold and gloomy light, and the pair of eyes also seemed to be flickering with a cold light. The heat of his hand burned her, and she looked down to see that he was wearing gloves. Her lips trembled slightly. She restrained herself because she knew that he was Amlin. He came. Only by wearing masks could they see each other under the bright lights. Their eyes met, and neither of them looked away. Not far away. Du Yuesheng smiled faintly and walked to the side. He could also see that it was Qin Amlin, the masked Qin Amlin. He bet that Liangxiu wouldn't dare to take off the mask. If she forced it, it would only force Qin Amlin away. Chapter 1836. He wasn't young anymore, but for some reason, he seemed to be unable to let go of women when he was younger. This wasn't a good thing. On the contrary, it was very dangerous. On the other side, Liangxiu reached out and held Qin Amlin's shoulder after recovering from her shock. She said in a low voice, "Let's dance." He didn't move for a moment. Then, she boldly hugged his waist and rested her face on his shoulder. He was about to reprimand her, but the music that was playing was very touching and suitable for such a dance. The people around them were also doing the same and would only be more touching than them. Qin Amlin's Adam's apple moved as he lowered his head to look at the woman in his arms. He suddenly reached out and took off her mask. Her beautiful face wasn't obstructed at all. He wanted to see her. His trembling hands moved from the back of her head all the way to the front, cupping her face and not moving away. Then, he moved his hands to the back of her head and pressed her face against his chest. He hugged her tightly like that. Yuliancio's face was pressed against his chest. His heart was beating very fast, and he felt very hot. She could still feel the warmth of his body through the few layers of clothing. Did he think that she wouldn't know it was him just like that? She wanted to speak, but he pressed her down and said in a suppressed voice, "Don't move. Otherwise, everything will end." Her body stiffened, and she immediately understood what he meant. Or rather, he had admitted his identity, but he wasn't willing to come back. Anlin. Her face was pressed against his chest, and her little hand sneaked under his jacket. She murmured, "You really don't care?" He looked down at her, and she also looked up. After so many days, this was the first time they were hugging so openly. His gaze was deep, and he didn't answer her. Instead, he lowered his head and kissed her lips. Through the mask, he felt a sense of security. He kissed her deeply, as though there was no one else around. He dared to do what Du Yueshing didn't dare to do. Du Yueshing's light kiss was nothing compared to this kiss. This kiss seemed to be filled with anger as he ruthlessly brushed her lips. Rather than saying it was a kiss, it was more like a punishment. She did not resist and weakly allowed him to kiss her. When he left her lips, she was standing on her tiptoes. Her body was folded in his arms, and her eyes were blurred. He was still wearing the mask, and his voice was hoarse. "Happy birthday." He took out a small and exquisite box from his pocket. There was a necklace inside. It was a very beautiful diamond, but not the ring. She looked at him and lifted her eyes. "Stay." There was a trace of coldness in his eyes. He gently broke free from her, turned around, and walked straight out. The crowd was in an uproar. Everyone had guessed that it was Qin Anlin, because only Qin Anlin's eyes could be so affectionate. He walked away, and she stood there with two long rows of people on either side of her. She stood there and said softly, "Du Yuesheng, will you marry me?" Qin Anlin's body paused, but he didn't turn around. He just stood there. When Du Yuesheng heard this, she sighed inwardly. If she was smart, she would have rejected it. However, such a request was too tempting, and he couldn't bear to reject it. He smiled faintly. "Of course I'm willing. If today is a wedding, I won't reject it." Chapter 1837. Unknowingly, Du Yuesheng had come to her side and used his last shred of conscience. "Are you serious? We are people of status. We can't afford to lose face like this." Yuliancio raised her face and chuckled. "I'm not joking with you. I'm serious." Du Yuesheng's expression became serious, and he looked at Yuliancio. "Really?" Yuliancio didn't make a sound. Her eyes gazed at the slender figure in the distance. Finally, he walked forward without looking back, nor did he ask her to stay. She knew that she was being willful, but she had just given birth, and today was her birthday, so she was willing to be willful for once. "Yes, I'm serious." With that, she hugged Du Yuesheng and kissed his lips. There was a hint of anger, and she was throwing caution to the wind, but she didn't get him to turn back even though she had gambled everything. The scene came to an end because of the male lead's departure. However, Qin Anlin didn't really leave, as Tang Yu got someone to stop him. The waiter was very polite. "Mr. Qin, President Tang invites you to a gathering." Qin Anlin turned his head, and there was a cold glint on his mask, which made the waiter's heart sink. However, Qin Anlin followed him to a suite on the 5th floor. The door opened, and the waiter left first. Qin Anlin walked in slowly, passed through the porch, and walked into the luxurious hall. Tang Yu was sitting on the sofa, with 2 goblets and a bottle of red wine in front of him. "Anlin, long time no see." Tang Yu smiled and moved his chin. "Sit." Qin Anlin didn't move, but looked inside. Chi-Chi is in the bedroom, and Xiaoxin and Mu Yun are in a room alone. Tang Yu's voice was indifferent. "You haven't been around these days, so I have to tell you." At this point, Tang Yu poured 2 glasses of wine and handed one to Qin Anlin, who was sitting down. He raised his eyebrows slightly. "Is it convenient to drink with a mask on?" Qin Anlin glanced at him and didn't say anything. Tang Yu smiled. "Mu Yin is much stronger than you. He asked to be Boyi's successor. Also, he wants to marry Xiaoxin when he grows up. Qin Anlin narrowed his eyes. You agree? Are you asking about the successor or about Xiaoxin? Tang Yu looked into his eyes, as if he could see into them. Qin Anlin was a little embarrassed. Both. Tang Yu's body fell backwards, a charming smile on his handsome face. I promised to give him a chance. As for being careful, she has to be willing. Qin Anlin closed his eyes. Although Tang Yu said it lightly, he could imagine how difficult it was for Mu Yun. Anlin, think about it. Do you really want to see Liangxiu and Du Yueshing together? Tang Yu's tone was even more indifferent. She's not joking. You should know her temper. Qin Anlin smiled bitterly. Yes, of course he knew that she was angry. He was alive, and he asked someone to tell her that he was dead. She had been sad for so long and gave birth to a child alone, but he still refused to come out. Now that they had met, he still refused to acknowledge her. Qin Anlin wiped his face, but it was cold. He allowed a long sigh. What can I do to get her back? With that, he took off the mask. Do I have such a face? Tang Yu was a little stunned, not because of the face, but because of Anlin's emotions. The same body. Qin Anlin's face was inscrutable. He reached out to take off his coat and shirt. Chapter 1838. Tang Yu was in a daze, forgetting to drink the wine that he was holding in his hand. They heard a scream from the bedroom door. They turned to take a look and saw that it was Pei Chi-Chi. Pei Chi-Chi was wearing a cute bear pajamas. Mr. Tang had requested for it, saying that there would be a special event that night. She did not expect Anlin to be here, nor did she expect Anlin to take off his clothes here. She swallowed her saliva and jumped over. Wow, what great skin! These injuries are so charming, so sexy. Pei Chi-Chi reached out and touched Qin Anlin's injury. Anlin, how can this injury be so ugly? She looked like she was about to drool, especially when she was swaying her body and wagging her short tail. She looked really cute. Qin Anlin looked at her and then at Tang Yu. He was originally feeling rather gloomy, but now he felt like fucking hell. This couple had been married for so many years, yet they were still fooling around. And Pei Chi-Chi didn't look scared when she saw his injury. It didn't seem like she was pretending. Was it really sexy? He was a little confused and looked at her. His voice was a little hoarse. Chi-Chi, don't touch it. Pei Chi-Chi looked like she couldn't bear to let go of it. It's quite nice. She looked up and looked at him eagerly. Anlin, do you know that it's very precious? It makes people want to touch it. She didn't look like she was pretending at all. She continued to drool. If you were like this in the past, there wouldn't be a chance for Tang Yu. Tang Yu narrowed his eyes and glared at her. His voice was a little creepy. Pei Chi-Chi. Pei Chi-Chi stuck out her tongue. Oh, I'll go back to my room and wait for you. She deliberately used a voice that Qin Anlin could hear. The big bad wolf's pajamas are ready for you. Hurry up. Qin Anlin felt that he simply couldn't bear to listen anymore. This couple, seriously, Tang Yu was also a little embarrassed. He coughed lightly. Go back to your room. Only then did Pei Chi-Chi reluctantly leave. Before she left, she even caressed Qin Anlin one more time. Qin Anlin adjusted his clothes and was even more annoyed. How did you raise her into such a sweet and innocent girl? In the past, she was quite a lonely girl. Although she got a little cramp later, she shouldn't be like this. Tang Yu smiled faintly and narrowed his eyes. Just spoil her. He got up. Don't wait until you regret it. She reached out and patted him. Look, even Chi-Chi admires your injuries. Liangxiu should like them too. The corners of Qin Anlin's eyes twitched when he saw Tang Yu walk into the bedroom in a hurry. His taste was getting worse. When he returned to his room, he slowly took off the mask and looked at his face in the mirror. It was still so scary. When Chi-Chi saw it, she said it had character. If Liangxiu saw it, would she be afraid? He didn't dare to take the risk. Moreover, he couldn't give her anything. Even when Du Yueshing kissed her today, he didn't stop him. For the first time, he was so weak because he couldn't give her everything. He walked into the bathroom. The water washed over his body and those ugly scars. GM Hotel. Linda sent Du Yueshing back to the suite. She helped him in because Mr. Du was drunk. Du Yueshing was drunk because of Yi Liangxiu. She was unhappy and pulled Du Yueshing to drink. Chapter 1839. She helped Du Yueshing lie on the sofa while Linda went to get him some water. There was a glass of water on the table. She took a sip and gave it to Du Yueshing without thinking too much. She helped him and carefully fed him a few mouthfuls. "Mr. Du, how is it?" Linda took good care of him, mainly because Mr. Du might be her boss in the future. She had seen the situation clearly. If President Qin did not return, Mr. Du would most likely marry Mr. Yi. From then on, she would have to follow Mr. Du's instructions. Linda was not stupid. She was now Mr. Ye's confidant. She was treated well in all aspects. If she wanted to survive, she would have to look at the situation. It was rare for Du Yueshang to get drunk. At this moment, he was bent in a woman's embrace. He could smell a fragrance. It was a feeling he had not felt for a long time. In his private life, he did not control himself too much. After all, he was single. He liked Liang Xiao, but she did not really get together with him. Hence, he had always had a woman in Hong Kong and had never been chased. Women were not rare to him. But now that he was drunk and uncomfortable, it felt different to have a pair of gentle hands supporting him. Du Yueshing opened his drunken eyes and looked at the little face in front of him. He was too drunk and could not tell who she was, but he hoped that she was Liang Xiao. He closed his eyes and grabbed her hand. "Liang Xiao." Linda was shocked and widened her eyes. "Mr. Du? I'm Linda." "Mr. Du?" This voice was very unfamiliar. It was not Liang Xiao. Linda was Liang Xiao's secretary. He remembered that she was quite pretty. Du Yueshing closed his eyes and let go of Linda. He muttered, "Why is it so hot? Pour me some water." Linda nodded and brought the water to his lips. "Mr. Du, drink some water." Du Yueshing was so drunk that he had forgotten that the water was poured by him. There was a pill in it. He had thought that if Liang Xiao came over tonight, she would drink the water. Then, he would end this complicated relationship. He wanted to marry her. However, he was drunk and forgot that the water was drugged. When he drank it himself, he was fine after a few mouthfuls, but now he had swallowed it all. It was getting hotter and hotter until it was almost unbearable. Du Yueshing narrowed his eyes before suddenly opening them. He looked at the beautiful face in front of him. That drug made people lose their humanity. It didn't matter if it was Liang Xiao or not. At this moment, what he wanted was freedom. The girl in front of him was very beautiful. He pressed her into his arms. Linda was frightened and swallowed hard. "Mr. Du, I am not Mr. Yi." Before she could finish her sentence, she was already kissed. The man's scorching aura immediately engulfed all of her senses. She had never experienced this kind of feeling before. Linda opened her eyes wide and resisted with all her might. No, the one who was going to sleep with her now, or rather, the one she was going to sleep with soon, was Mr. Ye's man. "I can't." She hammered and pushed him away with her tiny hands, but she was unable to push him away. On the contrary, as he kissed her, her body gradually heated up and a deep desire arose within her. Before Du Yueshang took her, he had a moment of clarity. But at this moment, the woman in his arms was already tender and tender. As a man, and a drunk man at that, he couldn't bear it. Linda was extremely afraid. She bit her lips and cried, "No, I'm afraid of pain." She had never been touched like this before. She was afraid. He looked so scary from his eyes to his body. Chapter 1840. However, how could she resist a man who had drunk the drug? The drunkenness turned into a muffled moan of warm panting that didn't stop for a long time. All these years, Du Yueshang was used to seeing romance. A mere Linda was not enough to make him panic. However, it was a little troublesome because Linda was Liang Xiao's person. If he touched her, there had to be an explanation. After the indulgence, all reason returned. Du Yueshing took a shower in the bathroom. Besides washing his body, he also cleared his head. Back in the bedroom, the girl who looked like a flower was sleeping soundly. Her fair body was pressed against the blanket, and on the white bed sheets, there was a dark red blood stain. He really did not expect that it would be her first time. She looked to be in her mid-20s. Du Yueshing's head hurt. A woman's first time was usually not easy to get rid of. He frowned and narrowed his eyes. Then, He walked to the wine cabinet and poured himself a glass of red wine. He had no intention of sleeping. He just stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window and looked at the night sky outside. In the end, he was waiting for the person on the bed to wake up. When Linda woke up, it was 7 in the morning. The presidential suite of the GM Hotel had a good view. From here, she could see half of New York. In the early morning, there was a thin layer of fog outside, and the scenery was beautiful. She slept on her stomach for the whole night. Moving a little, her body was very sore, and she unconsciously let out a soft cry. When she cried out like that, Du Yueshing knew that she was awake. He turned to look at Linda and said with a hoarse voice unique to men, "You're awake?" Linda grunted and then buried her face in the pillow. She really should have pretended. For example, she should have pulled at the bed sheets and shouted, "Where is this? Why is she in his bed?" Then, she should have cried and asked him to take responsibility. However, Linda disdained to do so. This man liked Mr. Yi. That glass of water last night was probably prepared for Mr. Yi. She did not expect that he would lose his integrity in his old age and be taken by a little secretary like her. What a pity. As Linda thought about it, she buried herself in the blanket and smiled. Then, she raised her eyes and looked at the old man. "Mr. Du, you didn't sleep all night. Are you thinking about how to marry me?" Du Yueshing's eyes darkened as she put down the cup in her hand. Her expression was gentle, and her voice was even gentler. "Linda, you have a much better sense of humor than Liangxiu." The two words Liangxiu, he said it so passionately that Linda couldn't mistake it for someone else. She smiled as well. "If not, then you must be thinking about how many checks you can use to get rid of me." Du Yuesheng smiled faintly, her expression becoming more and more affectionate. That expression gave Linda goosebumps. She stammered, "Could it be that he's asleep? He doesn't even have a check?" She boldly said, "If that's the case, you'll have to bear the consequences." Du Yuesheng grunted as traces of a smile appeared on her lips. "You're going to sue me?" "No." Linda looked at him and mouthed silently, "I'm pregnant." Those few words made Du Yuesheng, who had always been shrewd and ruthless, almost jump. He narrowed his eyes. "I don't believe that a girl would dare to do this to herself. Be good, be obedient." Linda was usually very gentle, but her temperament was not that of a little sheep. She couldn't sleep with him for nothing. Furthermore, he had taken medicine. It was her first time. Chapter 1841. The drug wasn't strong, and he was an experienced man. He knew how not to hurt a woman. Rude or not, "I can't sleep with you for nothing." Linda sat up and looked at him with her head tilted. "How about I ask Mr. Yi for a check when I'm pregnant?" Du Yuesheng had a headache when he heard that. He didn't care about the check, but it wasn't safe for a woman he had slept with to be with Liangxiu. He pondered for a moment and looked at the girl on the bed. "I'll give you 10 million to leave New York." "Of course." Linda smiled. "If only you had been this straightforward earlier." "Old man." Du Yuesheng's eyebrows twitched. He thought to himself that he was older than her, so he didn't mind. He went to the study and came back a minute later. He put a check in her hand and said with the gentleness of an old man, "Be a good girl and remember to take the medicine." She was actually quite sensible. Otherwise, he might not have remembered it in the morning. Most of his female companions were in brothels. Which one of them didn't deal with the aftermath obediently? Linda looked down. 10 million, right? She accepted it with a smile. After putting on her clothes and shoes, she said with a smile, "I forgot to tell you, Mr. Yi is going back to City B in a month, so he asked me to go back in the next 2 days." She paused. "If you don't like me, I'll go back today." Du Yuesheng's head hurt. This girl was really cunning, but he wouldn't argue with her. He thought for a while and said, "Forget about what happened last night. You know how to deal with it in front of Liangxiu." His tone was very serious when he said that. Linda casually nodded and put the check away. When they were about to walk out, Du Yuesheng said, "Why don't you want me to take responsibility?" Linda turned around and waved the check with an innocent look on her face. "I'm taking responsibility." The mature man's eyes were as calm as water as he looked at her. Linda couldn't pretend anymore and squeezed out a smile. "Mr. Du, I'm not interested in being a mistress. Besides, you're a little old." The corner of Du Yuesheng's eyes twitched again. She raised her hand and said in a carefree manner, "All right, we can go now. Looking at her gave him a headache. At her age, if he had a child earlier, he would be around this age. Therefore, after he woke up, he didn't have any feelings for her. He didn't even look at her when she changed her clothes. Just like the sudden rise and fall of the wind, however, after Linda left, Du Yueshing still made a call. Half an hour later, his secretary knocked on the door and said in an emotionless voice, "Mr. Du, Miss Linda just went to the pharmacy to buy medicine and took it. I also found out that she booked a flight to New York in the afternoon." Du Yuesheng was only wearing a bathrobe as he sat on the sofa. Despite being over 40 years old, his handsome face was still looking out the window. In front of him was an exquisite breakfast, and he seemed to be in a good mood. He ate gracefully and only took the time to ask, "Are you sure you bought morning after medicine?" The corner of the secretary's mouth twitched, and he looked a little uncomfortable. It was true that Mr. Du was drunk last night, but he had never been so impulsive. The other party was just a secretary, and Mr. Du usually did not touch innocent women. Chapter 1842. Du Yueshing's voice sank. "Don't let Mr. Yi know about this. Do you understand?" The secretary nodded and thought to himself, "Whether Mr. Yi knows about this or not depends on whether you've sealed Miss Linda's mouth. All right, you can leave. Let me change the bedsheets." Du Yueshing wanted a rest after dealing with the matter. After all, he needed a good rest after indulging himself in the middle of the night and not sleeping all night. He was over 40 years old and paid special attention to his health. Just as the secretary was about to do it, Du Yueshing stopped him. "Forget it. There's no need to change it. Don't let anyone disturb me this morning." When he was alone and lying on the bed that smelled like a woman, he couldn't fall asleep. His body still naturally felt a little restless. He sighed. Perhaps he was really old and couldn't touch girls anymore. This liveliness really couldn't be stopped once he ate it. He got up and changed the bed sheets. Linda returned to the apartment. Other than feeling a little tired, there was nothing strange. When she returned, Yu Liangxiu was sitting on the recliner in front of the window. She was holding it in her arms and feeding the child. Her long hair was naturally scattered. She was wearing a white pajamas that was unbuttoned. She lowered her head and watched the little guy eat. There was an indescribable beauty in that scene. Linda silently swallowed her saliva as she looked at him. Her fingers unconsciously reached for her belly. Last night, the old man had sowed seeds, but she had just used a small pill to extinguish it. She wouldn't have children. But now, watching Mr. Yi feed the child, she felt a sense of desire in her heart. That kind of pink and tender little thing really made people unable to resist at all. Linda's vision was a blur, but soon, the appearance of a baby appeared. It had the body of a baby, but the face was Du Yueshing's old face. Ah. Linda shook her head and quickly woke up. She must be crazy to want to have a child with that old man. Crazy, crazy. She had to forget. She stared at it for a long time. Naturally, Yu Liangxiu noticed it. She glanced at her and said softly, "What's wrong?" He paused for a moment. "Why didn't you come back last night?" Linda let out a long, "Oh," and touched her head. I went to the bar with Kime." Yu Liangxiu nodded lightly. Linda emphasized, "Mr. Yi, you don't know how bad Kim's tolerance is. In the end, I had to send him back." Yu Liangxiu glanced at her again and continued to feed the baby. Linda felt a chill down her spine. "Well, I'll go back to my room and take a shower first." That old fellow's stamina was abnormally good, but after sleeping with her, he was not so considerate and did not carry her to take a bath. However, the old fellow was probably out of energy. For the sake of the 10 million yuan, Linda was very understanding. She snorted and was about to leave when Yu Liangxiu said indifferently, "Kime left New York last night." Linda was originally bending over, but now she paused and turned her head. "He didn't even tell me. Tell me, where did you go last night?" Yu Liangxiu's gaze was very serious, reminding Linda of that old man. Sure enough, her choice was right. Mr. Yi and Mr. Du were from the same country, and even the tone of voice was quite similar. She touched her head, bit her lip, and squeezed out a charming smile. "Mr. Yi, you know, fooling around." Chapter 1843. Yi Liangxiu's expression didn't change. She looked at Linda for a while before smiling faintly. As long as it's fun. Linda bit her lip again. I'm going to shower. I have a plane to catch. Okay, as long as your legs aren't sore. Yi Liangxiu had always been calm. Her gaze made Linda's hair stand on end. She felt that it was better for her to be packed onto the plane as soon as possible. She was afraid that if this continued, she would expose herself. Actually, sleeping with him once wouldn't affect anything. If Mr. Yi liked Mr. Du, to be honest, that old man's skills weren't bad. Who knew how many women he had trained on? Last night, it would have been someone else. She wouldn't fight with Mr. Yi. So, she wouldn't do something as stupid as leaving Mr. Yi just to sleep with an old man once. Moreover, Mr. Yi might not like that old man. However, if Du Yuesheng really got together with Mr. Yi, she thought that she would leave King Entertainment and not cause trouble for Mr. Yi. When Linda came out with her suitcase, she felt that she could lift it up and put it down. She came over and kissed An and Lan again. I'm going back first. See you in a month, little babies. Yi Liangxiu called the driver to pick her up. She didn't ask why Linda brought the flight forward by 2 days. Linda left. Keim, who said that he wasn't in New York, knocked on the door and came in. Yi Liangxiu looked up at him. Then, she put the 2 babies down. When she leaned over, she said faintly, Go find out where Linda went last night. Keim nodded. His expression was complicated. Yi Liangxiu knew very well that she had asked Linda to send Du Yuesheng back last night. She looked up and paused. Go check the GM surveillance. See what time Linda left the room. And when Linda came back, she was in a sorry state. She had always been a fan of details. How could she not see it? Keim made a few calls. After a while, he got a reply. At this moment, his mood was even more complicated. He wanted to say something, but hesitated. It's 8 in the morning. What this meant was too clear. Linda and Du Yuesheng slept together for the night. As for whether or not something had happened, there was no need to guess. Keim sympathized with Mr. Yi, so he dragged Du Yuesheng over from 1,000 miles away. Unexpectedly, Du Yuesheng slept with Linda on the first night. He pondered for a moment. Mr. Yi, how should we handle this? Yi Liangxiu replied without hesitation, Keep it a secret. Now, KMG didn't understand what she was really thinking. Did she want to continue with Mr. Du, or get it to Linda? Linda didn't seem to have that intention. Smart man. Yi Liangxiu didn't ask about Linda anymore. Instead, she asked something else. Is there any news from Anlin? Keim smiled faintly. President Qin met President Tang last night. Got it. Yi Liangxiu knew that it must be Tang Yu's intention. Keim left. She stood alone in the bedroom and looked at the New York sky through the window. Anlin, are you happier under such a sky? Is it because I'm forcing you to be in pain? She knew that he was deliberately avoiding it. He clearly knew his identity, but he didn't want to admit it. She couldn't expose him. She was just lonely, but he really felt pain. In the afternoon, Du Yuesheng came over. Yi Liangxiu met him in the living room. Chapter 1844. Yi Liangxiu brewed a pot of British-style black tea and smiled at Du Yuesheng. Why are you here? Du Yuesheng looked around and smiled. Isn't it normal for a fiancé to visit his fiancée? I thought last night was just an act, she said in a low voice as she took a sip of tea from the cup. Du Yuesheng looked at her and didn't notice anything strange. Plus, knowing that Linda had left, he heaved a sigh of relief. Although such a thing wasn't too important, it wasn't good to know. Now that it was erased, everyone would be happy. Think about it. I'm serious. Du Yuesheng looked at the children again. I was married once, but I didn't get pregnant. The Du family also needs an heir. Liangxiu, if you don't want children after marriage, or even want to live apart, it's fine. I can go to B-City a few times a month. He was very sincere and gave her the greatest freedom. Moreover, he guaranteed the status of her children. Such conditions couldn't be said not to be moved. However, Yi Liangxiu smiled faintly and refilled his cup of tea. She asked slowly, Yuesheng, do you love me? Du Yuesheng was a little stunned by the way she addressed him. Such a gentle call was indeed very touching. However, he still hesitated for a moment before answering her question. Liangxiu, at my age, love isn't love. It's a little childish, but I like you and want to take care of you." Her face seemed to be a little disappointed. After a while, she smiled faintly. "It's not love," she tilted her head. "All right then, let's agree. If you like someone else before marriage and want to break the contract, that's fine too." Du Yuesheng couldn't understand her intentions. It seemed like she had agreed, but it also seemed like she hadn't. However, it was better than refusing. Yi Lianxiu smiled faintly. "Since that's the case, then Yuesheng, go back to Hong Kong first, okay?" Her tone was full of politeness, but he couldn't hear the self-awareness of a fiancé. How could someone like Du Yuesheng not hear it? He suddenly had a feeling that he had been tricked by her. But thinking about it, her goal was nothing more than to make use of him, to work like a slave. Now, all she wanted to do was to find Qin Anlin. He was just an eyesore. Thus, he said politely, "Then I'll visit you when you return to B City." She smiled and did not refuse. Du Yuesheng left. When she reached the door, her expression froze. He felt that things were not that simple. Could it be that Lianxiu knew something? There was no reason. If she knew, even if she didn't care about him, she would ask him to be responsible for her little secretary. He knew that they had a good relationship. Therefore, after he slept with Linda, he felt that it was a little troublesome. Du Yuesheng did as he said. When he returned to Hong Kong, he would send some things over from time to time. Sometimes it was a small item to make a girl happy, and sometimes it was a big deal. In short, Mr. Du's way of pursuing women was quite unique. Yi Lianxiu accepted all of them and didn't hide them. She was quite high profile. The Chinese newspapers were full of news about her and Du Yuesheng, and her tacit consent was considered to be a stable relationship on the top floor of a certain building on Wall Street. In an exquisitely decorated bedroom, a man dressed in black stood in front of the bar counter. There was a newspaper on the bar counter. Chapter 1845. In the exquisitely decorated bedroom, a man dressed in black stood in front of the bar. There was a newspaper on the bar. A silver mask covered half of his face. There was no expression on his face. Only a pair of black eyes revealed his true emotions. He held the wine in the glass, drank it in one gulp, and then crushed the glass. It was great. As he wished, she and Du Yuesheng were exchanging flirtatious glances. It was really great. Wasn't this what he wanted? Why did he still feel a little sad in his heart? Was it because he was unwilling, or was it because he was unwilling? He felt a sense of anger rising in his lower abdomen, and it was difficult to calm it down. It had been half a month. He didn't look for her. She also treated him as air and didn't look for him again. Qin Anlin, maybe she has forgotten you. Maybe she was scared by your appearance. Maybe she has given up on you. The feelings you thought you had long been diluted. He reached out to touch his face, and the corner of his mouth curled into a self-deprecating smile. No one could tolerate such a husband. Don't even think about it. He endured for half a month and finally couldn't help it. His reason told him not to provoke her, but his body, or the beast living in his body, made the decision to capture her again. He prepared a silk black nightgown for her, and when she fell asleep, he helped her change into it. He felt that he was a little perverted. When he helped her change into the nightgown, he kissed her body as if he was worshipping her. The whiteness was so perfect that he couldn't control himself. He kissed her a little hard and woke her up. When she opened her eyes, it was still dark in front of her, and her hands were tied. "It's you?" Her voice was a little panicked, but she didn't scream or struggle. "Yes, it's me." His voice was hoarse, and he squinted to see her reaction. She might know it was him, or she might not know, but at this moment, when he kissed her, she was intoxicated. The light was dim, and she was bound by him in such an unbearable position. This situation was very ambiguous. He squinted his eyes, and his voice was deliberately hoarse. "Little thing, we meet again." Yi Lianxiu felt it for a moment. It was him. In his heart, he secretly cursed the pervert, but on the surface, he wore a blank expression. "You again? Don't you like it?" He got up, poured himself a glass of red wine, and stood, staring at her. He took a sip of the red wine. When he drank it, his throat rolled slightly. It was very sexy. His gaze seemed to be on fire as he stared at the seductive body. This was his wife, and he knew how beautiful she was and how moving she was. He remembered the feeling of being buried in her. Her body instantly tensed up, and the glass in her hand tilted downwards. All the cold wine poured onto her body, staining her with a dark red hue. No, she finally struggled out of uneasiness and bit her lip. What do you want to do? Her pajamas rolled up because of her struggle, and it was extremely seductive. Not only did she want to keep him, but she also wanted him. He kissed her, but he didn't do it. He kept kissing her. It wasn't until she was back down that she was able to let go of him. Hugging his shoulders, she moved up and touched a mask. His body froze for a moment. He looked up and said hoarsely, "If you take off the mask, I promise, the game will end." Game? He thought that this was a game. Chapter 1846. He was stunned. He probably hadn't expected her to say that. She wanted to touch him? His Adam's apple bobbed as he looked at her messy clothes. Her fair body was covered in dark red wine. That decadent look was enough to make any saint go crazy. Really, his voice was hoarse and ragged, but there was a mysterious power in it. "Are you sure you want to do this?" After she said it, he realized that he also desired it. He longed for contact with her. He longed for comfort in his exhausted soul. "You can let go of me first." Her voice was also slightly hoarse. Because she couldn't see, all her senses were based on her hearing. She heard the sound of the buttons rubbing against the fabric. One by one, the fabric was undone, and the light fabric was thrown on the floor. It was a soft sound, like a sigh. Her hands were untied, and then she was caught. That hand was like a pair of fire tongs, holding her firmly. She was a little timid and called out softly, "Amlin." This call was completely out of instinct. It came from the depths of her heart. Unconsciously, she voiced out the true feelings in her heart. In an instant, the air froze. He loosened his grip on her hand and then tightened it again. His dark eyes narrowed as he stared at her face. His voice was unprecedentedly cold. "Yiliangshio, I'm not Qin, Amlin." He couldn't take back the words that he had said. Yiliangshio stroked her chin. She was born pretty, especially her delicate collarbone. Now that it was stained with wine, she looked exceptionally seductive. His dark eyes looked at her. His Adam's apple couldn't help but loosen. He had an urge to press her down immediately. But what could he do if he pressed her down? His whole body seemed to be on fire, but there was still no movement from a certain part of his body. This made him feel defeated. Compared to appearance, men were more concerned about this. They were more concerned about whether they could conquer a woman in bed. She lifted her head, and he couldn't see her, but she was able to hold his hand and prevent him from escaping. Her voice was a little forceful. "You said that you're not Amlin. So how do you know that my name is Yiliangshio and that my surname is Qin?" The man followed her strength and directly turned over. His body was tightly pressed against hers, and his thin lips also whispered in her ear, "You are my little prey. How could I not know everything about you?" As he spoke, his palms began to move down on her. With her eyes blindfolded, her eyelids moved the most. After a while, she started to pant. "And did he do the same to you?" He kissed her slender white neck, his voice extremely husky. She knew that right now. She must be in a mess, tormented beyond recognition. She bit her lips and closed her eyes. "Believe me, he has done more than you. Like this or like this." Every word he said was fatal. Looking at her expression, his heart also gave birth to a feeling that it was almost perverted. He felt that this was also quite good. The end, a hot sweat and a bout of emptiness were after all different. She lay down to calm herself down. Her fingers tugged at the silk bed sheets beneath her, causing a wrinkle to appear, but it added a touch of messy beauty. She was lying down so tenderly. If he said that he wasn't moved, he wouldn't be a man. Lying on his side, he looked at her with a burning gaze. "Is it comfortable?" Chapter 1847. Seeing her like this, he felt a sense of satisfaction in his heart. That feeling came so strangely and quickly. He stretched out his finger and gently stroked her delicate face. "Do you want to wash it?" he asked in a hoarse voice. She caught hold of his hand at once and felt a special sensation. Even though they were husband and wife, Her face was still blushing at the sight of the two of them. She closed her eyes slightly and said with a trembling voice, "Your hand, you haven't washed it." He paused for a moment. He had not thought of this. He had been rash just now, and now he had touched her face as he wished. He did not have the time to care so much. Moreover, she had never been so particular before. They had done things that were 100 times dirtier. They had shared it together. Suddenly, he thought of the past and had a sudden thought. He wanted to please her. His body suddenly heated up, and she felt it too. She gritted her teeth and said, "Don't do anything rash." Her hand pushed his shoulder, and he instinctively moved away. However, he did not expect that she would immediately tear off the cloth on his face. Even though it was dim, she could see him, his face, and even his body, including the scar on half of his body. It was so shocking that it fell into her eyes. His heart ached so much that he could not breathe because he saw her pupils constrict. She cared about him. In that 1/10,000th of a second, besides heartache, she also felt fear. Yes, who would not be afraid after seeing this body? Even though they used to love each other so much, even though she used to be willing to die for him, his dark eyes were narrowed, and his whole body was filled with horror. Yuliancio was stunned for a long time. She slowly reached out and touched his wound as if she was in a dream. Her voice was also trembling. "Does it still hurt?" His body trembled. He was sitting, and she was kneeling beside him, but she did not dare to take off his mask. That was the last trace of his pride. However, that half of his face had already betrayed the fact that he was Qin Anlin. She was kneeling, and her body was still in a mess, but she did not care. In her eyes, in her heart, there was only him and his wound. Her voice sounded like she was crying, and she called him Anlin. His body trembled as he looked at her with narrowed eyes. Her fair and slender fingers gently touched his wound. She didn't dare to use too much force for fear of breaking him. His tears never stopped. If she had behaved a little more forcefully, he could have pushed her away and coldly told her that he didn't care about her anymore. But she was crying. Moreover, she was so soft, and she had even been bullied by his fingers once. No matter what, even if it was just an act, he couldn't get angry at her. He could only look at her and watch her cry. His strong hand suddenly grasped hers, and his voice was extremely hoarse. "Yuliancio, if you're smart, you should leave immediately." She tilted her head back and looked into his face. Familiar yet strange. Even though half of his face was intact, the expression in his eyes was different. His face was also extremely cold, as if it had been carved by a knife. Her fingers gently moved to where his heart was and pressed her tearful face against it. As she rubbed it, she asked softly, "Is this place of yours as hard as your body?" Qin Anlin was speechless. She really knew how to talk. Chapter 1848. Qin Anlin's eyes narrowed. He lowered his head and looked at the woman who was pressed against his chest. She was so hot, so soft, and so warm. It was his courage to struggle to live, not to live to be with her, but to live, to see her happy. He had never thought that he would be so popular. He was simply a Casanova. But when it came to it, he felt that everything was so natural. But what did she mean now? She was sobbing like a pear blossom in the rain, but she kept rubbing him with all her might and rubbing her face against his. She was not a virgin. Don't tell me that she didn't know that it was called seduction. If he was not that, he would have pounced on her no matter what. She should know it clearly. Why did she still tease him like this? Qin Anlin's pain was that he wanted to, but he could not. It was not that he did not want to, but he could not. Looking at her, he would feel hot. He would want to, and he would even feel very tense and uncomfortable, but he just could not. It was as if all his strength was locked in a mysterious place in his body. He tried hard to break it, but he could not. After so many days, his injuries had already healed. Chi-Chi was 80 to 80%, but this place was useless. Not only to her, but he also did not have the reaction he should have had in the morning. At this moment, he felt even more uncomfortable when she was like this. He reached out and pushed her away. "Have you had enough?" With tears in her eyes, she looked up at him. although she did not deny that she was acting and had the intention of seducing him. His injury was quite frightening, but he could not scare her away. Actually, this was quite a character. If she wanted to be more serious, she could treat her husband as a ferocious beast. Yuliancio had never thought that she would have such a crazy idea. Not enough. She did not stand on ceremony with him. Why should she stand on ceremony with him? You lied to me by pretending to be dead, made me a widow, hooked up with another woman behind my back, and even kidnapped me to play such a perverted game. She sneered. Qin Amlin, I want to ask you, have you had enough? He froze for a moment. He didn't expect her to be so fierce. However, he quickly reacted. What about Du Yuesheng? Du Yuesheng? She gritted her teeth, and her finger impolitely poked his chest as she approached him step by step. His body was forced to move to the side of the bed. Thinking about it, his body was covered in glorious scars, and he was also wearing a mask. He could not scare people, and in front of her powerful aura, he was like a weak little beast. It was also laughable. She stuck close to him and said in a particularly flirtatious voice, Du Yuesheng, aren't you a good pimp for me? President Qin, have you forgotten? She raised her hand to play with her curly hair. I seem to have forgotten that President Qin doesn't exist anymore. In this world, there's only one man called King. Qin Amlin also sneered in a low voice. Yes, I was the good pimp for the widow, but even such a smart and beautiful Mr. Yi couldn't make an old man stay. His fingers pinched her chin, and his masked face came close to hers. He gently breathed out a warm breath. You were even cut off by your own little secretary. Oh, you just announced your engagement last night, right? How sad. Chapter 1849. Qin Amlin had undoubtedly stepped on her sore spot. Although she didn't care about Du Yuesheng, she was probably rubbing Linda and Du Yuesheng in her heart. The reason why she made this decision was that she knew that Linda was clean and had not been in a relationship for the past few years. Although Du Yuesheng was a man who was used to seeing love and was an old man who had been married for 2 years, he was a well-behaved person. Mr. Yu didn't know that the glass of water was prepared for her at this moment, or else he would have been very upset. Moreover, old men doted on others, didn't they? They wouldn't be like Qin Amlin. After all, she had just gotten engaged last night, and Du Yuesheng had slept with Linda that night. This wasn't something to be proud of, especially when she was ridiculed by Qin Amlin. She looked into his eyes, and the corners of her mouth curled up into a pure smile. Her slender arms immediately circled around his neck, hugging him, not letting him escape. She smiled at him with her long hair wrapped around her body. The shoulder strap of her pajamas had long slipped down. She looked like she was going to die. Then it must be because I'm not charming enough to make Mr. Du stay, she whispered into his ear. Amlin, did you not teach me well in the past, huh? Yuliancio had a cold look and was a standard goddess, but at this moment, she deliberately acted like this. It was enough to stir up any man's hormones. Not to mention 1 Du Yuesheng. Even 10 Du Yuesheng could be easily taken down. It was the same for Qin Amlin. Even 10 Qin Amlin and the current 10 kings couldn't resist her charm. His Adam's apple kept moving as he controlled himself from hugging her. She was completely a little vixen now. The little vixen bit his ear and continued to plead. Amlin, teach me, huh? All the lines of defense collapsed. That string was broken. Was this the reaction an ex-husband and wife who had experienced life and death should have? Shouldn't she be trying to check if there was anything wrong with his body? Shouldn't she be hugging him and crying? Why was she seducing him? He didn't understand, and he couldn't figure it out no matter how hot his brain was. He could only stare at her. He could only stare at her without saying a word. Seeing him like this, Yuliancio felt that it was about time. She had thought that he was so promising now, but it turned out that half of his brain was still in the lower half of his body. Once the sperm entered his brain, he couldn't think anymore. She yawned and hugged his waist instead. It's getting late. Amlin, do you want to sleep? His body was still stiff. None of this was within his expectations. He didn't even know what to do with her, or rather, he couldn't see through her heart. What was she thinking? Did he want him to go back? It was impossible for him to go back. It was unnecessary to be her husband. He could not give her anything. For a moment, he could use his hands, or even use, but as time passed, she would find out. She wasn't a little girl who could be easily fooled. Yes, if she was gullible, he would be willing to lie to her for the rest of his life, but he couldn't. He lowered his head and looked at her. His voice was a little hoarse. "I'll get someone to send you back. You should feed the child." She raised her head. There was an emotion in her eyes that he couldn't understand. She said very slowly, "Cheen Amlin, you've eaten them all, and Amlin will probably only be able to make milk powder." His body trembled, and he turned his face to the side. Chapter 1850. Yuliancio looked at his face and said slowly, "I'll take a shower first. You can decide slowly." She paused. "If you send me away, there's a possibility that I won't come back unless you kidnap me again. But Amlin, I don't have a man now. If I have a man one day, will you still want to maintain this relationship with me? Share me with someone else?" With that said, she curled her lips. "Tie me up here, pour me red wine, kiss me, and touch me? She got up and walked in the direction of the bathroom, as if she was familiar with it. Before closing the bathroom door, she threw a sentence at him. "Or do you like to touch married women now?" If he had something in his hand, he would have thrown it at her without hesitation. It was too hateful. Her little mouth was too hateful. She clearly knew, but she still angered him like this. Cheen Amlin got up and casually picked up his shirt and put it on. He then walked to the living room and stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, looking at the New York night. Although he was angry at her for calling him a scoundrel, he heard every word. She was right. His identity had been exposed. Actually, even if it hadn't been exposed, it was something he was well aware of. He couldn't forget it, so he appeared in front of her again and again, exposing himself. He hadn't done it thoroughly. He hadn't been ruthless enough. In the end, he still had a glimmer of hope in his heart. He still yearned for her to love him. Even though he was in such a terrible state now, even though he was inferior to Du Yuesheng in terms of appearance, body, and other aspects, and was actually inferior to an ordinary man, he still yearned for her. Otherwise, he wouldn't have tied her up. To stay or to leave, he was in a dilemma. Yuliancio stood behind him in his bathrobe, looking at his back. "Amlin, you might think that I'm willful, but you're even more willful than I am." Her voice was extremely clear in the dark night, and every word sounded like pearls falling. "You arranged all of this for me, but have you ever thought about whether it's what I want?" Her voice was a little choked. His heart suddenly tightened, and he clenched his fists, trying to resist the urge to hug her. "You said that you're dead, but you're still alive. You probably think that you won't be able to endure it and that you might die, right?" She continued to speak in a very soft voice. "Do you know, I'd rather experience the pain of losing you twice. I don't want you to be alone." His body trembled. Finally, he slowly turned around and looked at her. He looked at her in his bathrobe. She looked elegant, no longer as charming as before. Her expression was very uneasy and timid. She looked very much like the little girl he had spent $500,000 to sleep with. He opened his mouth, and his voice was unbelievably hoarse. "Yuliancio, where's your aura? Where's your fierceness just now?" She was still standing there with tears in her eyes. "I was eaten by a dog." Her words were not pleasant to hear, but they struck him hard at the bottom of his heart, making his heart ache and feel extremely uncomfortable. He also knew that she was a Best Actress and had won many awards. Even international directors had said that she was a gift from God. With that cold face of hers, she was able to speak like a human being and speak like a ghost. However, he still believed in the ghost that she had spouted now. "Liangxiu," he sighed, "why must you be so persistent?" Chapter 1851. Yulianchio's teary eyes seemed to be covered by a layer of mist, and she was wearing a clean bathrobe. Really, if she wanted to be an angel, she would be an angel. If she wanted to be a slut, she would be a slut. Besides using her acting skills on the big screen in the past, she had been using them on him ever since. He stared at her delicate and adorable face. His gaze was very cold, but she still stood there, unmoved. She did not retreat, nor did she take a step forward. She was waiting for him to take the initiative to come over. He did not know how torturous it was for her to know that he was still alive. She knew that he was lying in the hospital, knew that he was still alive, and even knew that his life was hanging by a thread, but she pretended that she did not know anything. Everything was for his pride, for his painstaking arrangements. Amlin, I'm not made of iron. I don't blame you, I don't resent you, and I don't have the right to do this. But now, you're standing in front of me. Although you're not perfect, I still want you. She did not force him. She wanted him to come over himself. Sheen Amlin, if you're a man, get over here, take off that ghost mask, hug me openly, and kiss me. She did not want to be separated from him by anything anymore. In the dim light, his eyes seemed to be burning with a small flame, so bright that it could ignite her entire world. Her tears fell like rain, and her body began to tremble. Her lips were trembling, and she could not say a word. This time it was not an act. She had a feeling that he was about to make a decision. She said hoarsely, Sheen Amlin, think about it carefully. If you don't come over here now, I'll go out and find a few men. There was some bravado in her words. In the end, she didn't have enough confidence, because right now his heart was really perverted. She even suspected that he would say, let's play together. She stood there for a long time, as though she was standing in another world. Her legs felt like they were filled with lead. He finally said, Yi Liangxiu, you've grown up, huh? He took a step forward and pinched her sharp chin. Lowering his eyes, he gazed at her. Take my money to find a man, huh? She pursed her lips. I can find it without spending money. Do you believe it? She pulled down her bathrobe. Sheen Amlin closed his eyes and cursed, Yi Liangxiu, you're a fucking demon. Her eyes were bright. She knew him very well. So how could she not know that his perseverance was beginning to crumble? No matter how strong his protection was, it was no match for her amazing acting skills. She spoke with a nasal voice. If you don't like it, I can also be a pure and innocent saintess every day. Half of his face and the other half of his mask had turned black. He gritted his teeth. Yi Liangxiu, or you can call me little sweetheart. She squeezed out a sweet smile with tears in her eyes. Sheen Amlin brusquely wiped away the tears on her face. His actions were not gentle at all, and his words were even less courteous. Yi Liangxiu, you're almost 30, aren't you? You have the cheek to ask me to call you little sweetheart? I believe there will be people who will be willing. There was a hint of malice in her eyes. Anyway, Du Yueshing's relationship with Linda hasn't been exposed yet. I can still marry him. And then what? Let Linda be his concubine? She smiled happily. That's pretty good. We'll be a happy family. She stabbed him again. Do you think it's Amlin? Chapter 1852. The veins on Sheen Amlin's forehead were popping, as though they were about to explode. You don't agree? She chuckled. Wasn't this arranged by you? I like Linda too. It's pretty good. He laughed coldly. You're quite magnanimous. He pinched her cheek forcefully. She cried out in pain and stared at him with tears in her eyes. Sheen Amlin's voice was tense. You were so fierce just now. Why aren't you like that now? HM? He hadn't put his hand down and kept pinching her face. She bit her lip and glared at him. Sheen Amlin pinched her again. As she cried out in pain, he said in a deep voice, Now, you're like the little girl from before. Yi Liangxiu's heart skipped a beat. She looked up at him. Then you're willing to let your little girl marry an old man and share him with other women? She wrapped her arms around his neck and pressed her body against him. Do you want me to serve him like this at night? With that, she kissed the wound on his neck with a devout look. She wasn't scared at all. His body froze, not because of the love jade, but because of shock, because of what she was doing to him now. His voice was tense, and he narrowed his eyes. You really don't care? Care about what? She looked down. Her face was pressed against his mask, and her voice was a little shaky. Amlin, do you care about your injury? Or do you care about your little secretary, HM? He lowered his head and looked at her. His voice was even more hoarse. You won't like it. Whether I like it or not, we'll only know after we see it. She kissed his lips directly. She didn't go deep, but just murmured against him, maybe it's heartache? Her long eyelashes fluttered. She opened her eyes and looked into his eyes. Anlin, I still feel it. To your body, to your person. Her hands moved down slowly and hugged his waist. Anlin, do you still feel it? He looked down, a little speechless. If he didn't feel anything, why did he kidnap her? Did they really think he was a pervert? Seeing him glaring at her, Liangxiu smiled. Her smile was a little sweet, and then very emotional. Anlin, I don't care what you look like. You are you. You are Qin Anlin, my husband. We're divorced. His voice was husky as he kindly reminded her. She deliberately teased him, her little hands rubbing here and there. Then how about I married to Yuesheng? Every night, I sleep beside him. He wants to kiss me, he wants me. Anlin, should I reject him? At the end of her sentence, she was already moaning softly because he had suddenly grabbed her hand and gripped it tightly. She moaned softly and said that it hurt. Her voice was as sweet as honey. Anlin, what do you say? His face darkened. What did you just say? Didn't you just say that you want me to return to your side? And now I'm going to marry an old man? He was tormenting her too much. She could only moan softly and put her face on his shoulder, hanging down weakly for a while. After a long time, she raised her head again. This old man was also arranged by you. Looking at her was really hateful. He lowered his head and kissed her. It was a very, very deep kiss, so deep that it hurt her. She clenched her fists and hammered his shoulder, begging desperately. But he couldn't let it go. Regaining what he had lost was the only thing he missed at this moment. This kiss became intense. Chapter 1853. The kiss became intense. When she came back to her senses, she was pressed against the glass of the floor-to-ceiling window. Behind her was the cold glass and half of the night view of New York. Being pressed like this felt like she was floating in midair and in danger of falling at any time. She didn't dare to push him, afraid that she would be smashed into pieces. Man and woman, perfection and ugliness, were perfectly combined at this moment. His kiss was deep, and the depths of her soul ached. Finally, he was satisfied and let go of her body. Her legs gave way, and Yi Liangxiu fell. He didn't help her up. Facing the light, the mask on his face seemed particularly out of place. He looked down at the woman who was panting in a sorry state, and his voice was extremely hoarse. Yi Liangxiu, are you sure? Are you sure that this face won't make you sick? It might even make you have nightmares. She leaned against the glass and had to use one hand to support herself. You could try and see if I will have nightmares. She looked at him stubbornly and said. His expression was even more gloomy. Yi Liangxiu, when did you become so unreserved? She smiled coquettishly. Qin Anlin, when have I ever been reserved? He didn't say anything else, but put his fingers on his mask. His voice was like a taut string. Don't regret it, he added. I won't let you regret it. Anlin, I like your last sentence. She was still in the mood to argue with him. Qin Anlin's Adam's apple bobbed, and he said, shameless. No matter how she heard it, it sounded a little awkward. He was the one who kidnapped her and did all the shameful things, but now he was talking about her. But she didn't argue with him. Her eyes were burning. Finally, he took off the silver mask. It wasn't very clear against the light, but she could still see 70% to 80% of it. Yi Liangxiu froze for a moment. There was pain in his eyes. If you regret it, you can leave. She was still sitting with her head raised. Her voice was very soft and dreamy. Just now, you said that I'm not allowed to regret it. All right. He reached out to pull her up and pulled her into his arms. His arms held her waist in a domineering manner. He threw away the glove as well. His scarred hand gripped her sharp chin and forced her to look up at his face. The face of half angel, half devil. His gaze was bottomless, so dark that it was almost strange. Yi Liangxiu, do you see it clearly? How scary is this face? Her eyes were fixed on his face, from top to bottom, looking at him from head to toe. That burning gaze made his originally dark thoughts a little angry. Yi Liangxiu, is there a need to be so detailed? Do you need a magnifying glass to take a good look? She looked at it for a long time and finally said, it's quite scary. Half of his face had already lost its color. In any case, whether he was happy or not, he was just as ugly. The other half of his face was completely dark. Don't be unhappy. There was still half of it, but it's all the same now. She was not afraid and even dared to laugh at him. Qin Anlin's face was really dark. He pinched her chin and said, Yi Liangxiu, your reaction is very unique. I thought you'd be surprised, darling. She was very cute, which was rare. He was stunned for a moment, not knowing how to react. Chapter 1854. Yi Liangxiu smiled faintly, her fingers trembling as she caressed his face. Anlin, I'm not as calm as you think I am. I do care about your injuries, but there's nothing more important than you being alive. I'm afraid too. She smiled faintly, her smile carefree. I'd be lying if I said I'm not afraid. Her palm covered his face tightly, like a wisp of spring breeze, soothing his soul. I'm afraid because I care about what you think. Actually, it's good that I'm ugly. If I'm ugly, no women will come to snatch me away. There were obvious tears in her eyes, but the smile she squeezed out was uglier than crying. He looked at her with a burning gaze. It's not that there aren't people who want to snatch me away. Chi-Chi said that my face has a special personality now. Her hand paused. Anlin, Pei Chi-Chi has been raised by Tang Yu to be a 3-year-old child. How can you believe what she says? If he sold his face, would he be able to sell it for money? Qin Anlin was no longer happy. My secretary also thinks that I'm charming. Because you're her boss. Take off your mask and see if she still wants to climb into your bed. She harumphed. Since you're so confident, why are you still hiding? Qin Anlin looked at her for a moment before saying slowly, Yi Liangxiu, are you jealous? She scoffed coldly. I used to be, but not anymore. You're quite safe now. His eyes darkened. She still cared. Yi Liangxiu rolled her eyes at him. I've said it before, staying alive is the most important. I can't lie and say that you're handsome now. Her fingers touched his face, and she smiled. Although I don't hate it, I quite like it. Men were childish. At this moment, his mood was much better. He coughed lightly. You said earlier that you wouldn't say anything nice to coax me. Everything I said was the truth. She snorted lightly. Being together with this appearance can't be said to be enjoyable, but Anlin is definitely not enduring. With that, she stood on tiptoe and kissed his lips, showing that she didn't care. Their lips and teeth intertwined. She hugged him without any reluctance. After a long time, she stepped back and looked at him. Now, do you still have doubts? His gaze trembled slightly and was filled with warmth. After a long time, he said in a hoarse voice, I won't. He added, you have to sleep with me tonight. That's the only way to make it count. He was acting like a child. Yi Liangxiu couldn't take it anymore, but she had to endure it no matter how much she ate. Right now, he was very sensitive. Okay. She raised her eyebrows, gathered her pajamas, and ran around looking for something. Probably because she couldn't find it, she tilted her head to look at him and said in a relaxed voice, Anlin, did you kidnap my phone? He glared at her and then threw out a phone for her to use. She smiled and dialed home. It was Aunt Sue who picked up the call. Liangxiu was like a young girl returning home at night. Her voice was nervous. Aunt Sue, I have something to do tonight. I won't be coming back. On the other side, Su Xiu's mind was in a mess. Oh no, young madam is really having an affair. Wiping her tears, Aunt Sue agreed softly. Okay, young madam, have fun. Yi Liangxiu knew that she was thinking about it. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She lowered her voice and said, Aunt Sue, what are you thinking about? I'm with Anlin now. Su Xiu immediately came back to life. Her voice was dragged out. It's Anlin. Chapter 1855. The moon is round, and the flowers are beautiful. The years are peaceful, and the family is beautiful. And Sue could only think of these old phrases. However, it was fine as long as she could achieve the artistic conception. But after a while, she felt a little uneasy. Did young madam see young master's injuries? This woman was a woman after all. She was as soft as water. Would young madam be able to accept young master's appearance being ruined? Aunt Sue was worried. She wanted to ask, but didn't dare to. She hesitated and didn't speak for a long time. Yi Liangxiu saw that she didn't speak for a long time and guessed what she was thinking. She smiled faintly. Aunt Sue, don't worry. Anlin is very good, very good. She didn't say it so directly, But Aunt Sue had been with her for a long time and understood what she meant. Although she didn't see it with her own eyes, she was still moved to tears. She had seen young Master's appearance and knew that it would be a waste for young Madam to make do with him. Aunt Sue wiped her tears. It's fun. There's me at home, and at the very least, there's Kime. He's good at taking care of children. Sigh. She was going to be embarrassed and cry. It was better to burn incense for old Madam. Aunt Sue felt that she had no more regrets in her life. Lianxio hung up the phone and turned to look at Qin Anlin. All right, I don't have to go home anymore. She walked towards him barefooted and hooked her slender arms around his neck. Carry me to the bathroom. I want to take a shower. His Adam's apple moved a little. He wanted to reject her, but he really couldn't resist such temptation. He pursed his lips, picked her up, and walked straight into the bathroom. The dense water vapor constantly made one's vision hazy. He pressed her against the bathroom wall and kissed her, but that was all. She actually wanted to, but after all, they had been separated for so long. He didn't make a move, so she didn't want to be too aggressive. After the hot shower, she was like a steamed shrimp. Qin Anlin stood under the water, and she leaned against the wall to watch. Suddenly, she agreed with what Chi-Chi said. This body was quite unique. Are you sure you want to keep looking at me like this? He continued to swim, his voice coming over. She smiled faintly. Yes. She walked over and hugged him from behind, refusing to let go. He let her hug him and said in a hoarse voice, Lianxio, you are the mother of 5 children. There's no one else here. I just want to hug you and feel your warmth. As she spoke, she kissed his back and pressed her face against his back. His voice became even more hoarse. I'm not a child anymore. I'm just a child now. I need a hug. She was completely shameless. She was completely different from the woman who had clamored earlier. He was speechless. Turning around, he took her face in his hands and looked at her for a long time. At this moment, he should have told her about his problem and let her decide if she wanted to be with him or not. However, he couldn't say it out loud. This was a man's bottom line. Sometimes, he even thought that perhaps he had played with too many women in the past, and this was his retribution from the heavens. After a long time, he picked her up, wrapped her in a towel, and walked into his bedroom. He fulfilled her wish and took care of her like a baby. He cleaned her up, made her smell good, and put her in his bed. While he was doing all this, she kept looking at his face, her gaze filled with dependence. Chapter 1856. His expression was a little stunned. She knew that he had given up and pursed her lips. You said you wanted me to accompany you. His fingers stroked her red lips gently, and he smiled. You'll be afraid. I'm not afraid. She hugged his slim waist and buried her face in it. She murmured, Anlin, I'm not afraid. She even pulled him to her side and hugged him like a child. See, I'm not afraid. Aren't you afraid, even if you turn off the lights? His voice was hoarse. His voice was damaged and not as elegant as it used to be. She shook her head vigorously. I'm not afraid, really. She kissed the side of his body. It's not perfect, but it's real. He had no idea how much she longed for this warmth. When she went to the morgue, the cold, dead air made her afraid. In the cemetery, she had not been there many times. Perhaps, from the bottom of her heart, she was not willing to accept the fact that he had died. Fortunately, he was back. Her Anlin was back. There were tears in her eyes as she looked at him emotionally. Anlin, when I said that I wanted to feel your presence, I wasn't just saying it. I really want to hug you. I want to make sure that you are alive and not just a cold body like you were back then. I was afraid that this was a dream. I was afraid that I would wake up from this dream. Hug me, and I won't be afraid. Perhaps it was because of the desire in her eyes. He slowly leaned against the headboard and hugged her gently. He still wore a thick silk nightgown, trying his best not to expose his body at all. He even wanted to wear a mask. She stopped him. She didn't want him to do this. She held his fingers tightly with both hands. She leaned into his arms and kissed him like a little cub. Her little teeth bit open the strap of his pajamas. He was shocked. Lianxio, what did she want to do? He held his pajamas like a girl who had been raped. She laughed, and her voice was very delicate. Anlin, I want to hug you. He understood what she meant and closed his eyes slightly. Isn't this enough? Leoncio, give me some time. His voice was indescribably fragile. After a long time, he did not receive any response from her. He slowly opened his eyes, thinking that she was angry. When he opened his eyes, he saw her giggling, her chin resting on his chest, and her fingers playing with his chin. Anlin, when did you become so chaste? His expression froze, and he patted her. All right, it's time to sleep. Behave yourself. Oh. Ji Yunshu let out a long sigh. She reached out and turned off the lights. His voice was light. Leoncio, are you sure? She nodded and buried her face in his arms. I'm not afraid. You're Anlin. Why would I be afraid? For a moment, Qin Anlin didn't know what to say. It seemed that he was touched, but she just couldn't feel moved. She was sometimes in the wind and sometimes in the rain. She was no longer the cold Leoncio from before. He seemed to have become more mischievous. He didn't feel good in his heart. He hugged her and sank into the long night. In the middle of the night, Yu Liangxiu did not fall asleep. She looked up at his arms. The moonlight was like water, illuminating the whole bedroom. It was quite beautiful, but this did not include her Anlin. His face was incomplete. She cared. She cared a lot. Because he had become like this, because he had used his life to exchange for hers. Chapter 1857. Anlin sacrificed everything for her to be in good condition. She wanted to do something for him, to avenge him, but the enemy was dead. She could do nothing. To be good to him, to make it up to him. She could only use her whole life. She couldn't hurt his pride. What she cared about was actually different from what he cared about. But they were both for each other. Her fingers gently stroked his face. She wasn't a fool. They had been together for so many years. It wasn't just his face tonight. He didn't want her. Even after being in contact for so long, she didn't feel his desire. She thought she knew what was wrong with him. She didn't dare to ask. If she did, he would leave. Men treated this as important as their lives. Even if she didn't care, it would still affect their lives. Because he cared a lot, she put herself in his arms, feeling his presence. Anlin, as long as you are alive, I don't care about anything, really, she murmured and fell asleep. Early in the morning, when she woke up, he was no longer in bed. Outside, it seemed to be his voice and a woman's voice. Was it his secretary? Yu Liangxiu leaned slightly, thinking quietly. A beautiful secretary. If she went back to B-City, would he go back? And if he went back, would his beautiful secretary follow him? She didn't ask about these last night, and she didn't dare to ask. They did recognize each other, but everything was different now. She wasn't that optimistic. Thinking about this, she got up. Her bathrobe was loose on her shoulders, and her hair was also lazy. She didn't even wear shoes. She walked all the way to his office. It was very bright, and she could smell the coffee. He couldn't have made it, because he always liked to order others around. His beautiful secretary was not only an assistant, but also took care of his daily life. Then, did the secretary lie on the bed she slept on last night? Qin Anlin was wearing an expensive handmade suit and a mask, standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling window and talking on the phone. Yu Liangxiu walked over, and her soft body wrapped around him from behind. She didn't say anything, just hugged him. He was on the phone, and he knew that she wouldn't mess around, so he just patted her hand, signaling her to finish as soon as possible. However, he still overestimated his understanding of her. 2 minutes later, she got impatient and bit him from behind. He was in pain, and the muscles on his back were all tangled up. She reached out and poked him, smiling happily. Qin Anlin turned his head as he answered the phone and watched her get up in the morning. The weather was fine. Holding the phone in one hand, he picked her up with the other and walked straight to his desk. Placing her on it, he absent-mindedly spoke in French and began torturing her with his other hand. Or, it should be called punishment. Not only did she not stop him, she even bit her lips and became even more presumptuous. An office was even more secretive than a bedroom, and it could even evoke some evil thoughts. In the end, she was a mess, moaning and begging him. He didn't know if she should beg him to stop or put down the phone and focus. Just as the temperature was rising, the office door was pushed open, and Zhang Yuanyuan looked inside in confusion. A woman, A very beautiful woman was only wearing a bathrobe, sitting on her boss's desk in her boss's hand. Chapter 1858. He had always been very exclusive. But did he need women? Zhang Yuanyuan said in a sharp voice. Why are you here? The woman on the desk was probably too slutty, so her intuition told her that she was a prostitute. Yi Liangqiu said lazily, Why can't we be here? Qin Anlin frowned. Get out. Zhang Yuanyuan smiled triumphantly. Boss, how much is the check? Yi Liangqiu smiled lazily. I don't want to leave him no matter how much it costs. What should I do? As she spoke, she charmingly rested her face on Qin Anlin's shoulder and looked at Zhang Yuanyuan with a smile. Zhang Yuanyuan felt deeply insulted. She was a highly educated girl. Since when did she need to deal with such a prostitute? She was about to lose her temper when she suddenly felt that the woman in front of her, who was only wearing a bathrobe, looked familiar. Zhang Yuanyuan couldn't help but gasp when she took a closer look. It turned out to be Yi Liangqiu. How could it be Yi Liangqiu? Why can't it be me? Yi Liangqiu put her face on the table and smiled. If she was a vixen just now, she was an angel now. Zhang Yuanyuan was embarrassed. She pursed her lips and said, This is the office. Isn't it inappropriate for Miss Yi to act like this? She took out the aura of a professional and stared at Yi Liangqiu. Yi Liangqiu smiled and looked at Zhang Yuanyuan. But Anlin likes it. Qin Anlin was speechless at her nonsense. Liangqiu hadn't been like this before. He raised his hand and gestured for Zhang Yuanyuan to leave first. Although Zhang Yuanyuan was unwilling, there was nothing she could do. When the office door was closed, Yi Liangqiu looked up at Qin Anlin. Your secretary is very beautiful. There was a little dissatisfaction in her tone. Qin Anlin smiled. Liangqiu, you weren't so childish before. You didn't use a female secretary in the past, she replied quickly, glaring at him. At this moment, his hand was already on her shoulder. Hearing her words, he let go. Go in and change your clothes. I'll send you back in a while. His voice was calm, unlike last night. Yi Liangqiu stared at his face as if she was trying to decipher the meaning of his words. After a long time, she tightened her bathrobe and asked softly, Anlin, what about you? Aren't you coming back with me? Qin Anlin reached out to stroke her long hair and sighed. Come and accompany me when you're free. Although it was tactful, it was very clear that he did not want to go back. He probably guessed what she wanted to say and sighed again. Liangqiu, I'm afraid of scaring the child. She froze. She stared at him for a long time and then smiled. I know, Anlin. She did not force him. After saying one more sentence, she turned around and walked towards the bedroom. But her footsteps and the sound of the door slamming did not mean that she was in a good mood. Qin Anlin stood there. The morning light outside shone on his silver mask, making him look a little mysterious and also a little ridiculous. His heart was a little pale. He turned around and looked out of the French windows. Sometimes, getting and losing were the same pain, the same dilemma. What should I do, Liangqiu? Now that we've met, it's hard to go back to the past. Can you accept me, child? Chapter 1859. We sleep together every night. You want me. How should I tell you that I can't satisfy you? After a while, she came out in a new set of clothes. It was his. I'm leaving first, she said softly. She didn't stay as thick-skinned as she had the night before. He turned his head and looked at her clothes. He was stunned for a moment, but in the end, he didn't say anything and just grunted. Yi Liangqiu looked at him. Qin Anlin, I might not come back. He grunted again. Qin Anlin, I'm going to marry Du Yuesheng when I get back to City B, she said fiercely. This time, he spoke with a faint smile. Didn't Du Yuesheng sleep with Linda? How are you going to marry her? She kicked him angrily and quickly walked out. Qin Anlin grabbed her arm and said in a low voice, Liangqiu, stop it. He hugged her from behind and pressed his face against hers. She felt the coldness of the mask, and her heart slowly calmed down. She was indeed angry, but it didn't mean that she couldn't think for him. She didn't say anything and listened to him. Liangqiu, is this okay for now? He murmured. I didn't consider skin grafting before because half of my body was destroyed. Now, at least let me fix my face, okay? He half begged, give me time. Her body softened. She turned around in his arms and looked up at him. Anlin, am I being too willful? He smiled. I allow the child's mother to be willful. She blushed slightly and pushed him away. Don't give me that. I don't believe you. Even so, even though she knew that he was hesitating, she still gave in. She had to give in. Qin Anlin asked someone to send her back. Zhang Yuanyuan opened the car door for her in the parking lot. She paused for a moment and said, Miss Yi, I don't think you know that the boss is now king, not Qin Anlin. I think he's happier being king. Outsiders don't need to interfere in the affairs between us husband and wife. Yi Lianqiu's voice was slightly cold. Zhang Yuanyuan chuckled. Really? If you're so confident, why doesn't King go back with you? She looked straight at Yi Lianqiu. People change. Miss Yi knows better than me whether he's happy or not. I just want to tell Miss Yi that people shouldn't be too selfish. Yi Lianqiu's heart skipped a beat. He pursed his lips and got into the car. Leaning against the back seat, she closed her eyes. Although Zhang Yuanyuan's words were selfish, they were not without reason. If he went back, would Anlin be happy? She was indeed a little too selfish. She brought him along to face everything. He let out a long sigh. His heart was in a mess. After Zhang Yuanyuan sent him off, she returned to her office on the top floor. As soon as she opened the door, she saw Qin Anlin sitting on the sofa smoking. The whole office was filled with smoke, and it was very choking. Zhang Yuanyuan immediately opened the window. Boss, Missy's already in the car. Qin Anlin nodded and didn't respond much. Zhang Yuanyuan hesitated for a long time before she plucked up her courage. Will you go back to City B? Qin Anlin looked up at her and smiled faintly. Perhaps. New York is more suitable for you. Zhang Yuanyuan blurted out. Qin Anlin didn't move. He looked at her deeply and said self-mockingly, You mean that New York is more suitable for a man with a ruined face, right? Zhang Yuanyuan shook her head. No. Chapter 1860. Miss Zhang, I think you're thinking too much. Qin Anlin's voice suddenly turned cold. There are no personal feelings between us. He paused for a moment. Please respect my wife next time you see her, or we won't be able to work together. Zhang Yuanyuan was stunned because of his ruthlessness. She thought that he always had some special feelings for her, because she had seen his most private side. She was the only one who used this office besides him. She would even take care of his daily life. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that she was half a wife. That was why she had the confidence to say that in front of Yi Lianqiu. Now he was saying it like this. It was as if nothing had happened. Zhang Yuanyuan couldn't take it anymore and said with difficulty, King, I thought I had a chance. We got along well before, didn't we? She thought about it and even said, I know you and she are divorced. I'm not the third party, am I? Qin Anlin pressed the cigarette but in his hand and looked at her. He said calmly, I've always treated you as a business partner. It's because she's back, isn't it? Zhang Yuanyuan's voice was a little sharp. That's why you rejected me and denied everything I did for you before. Qin Anlin's gaze was deep. After a moment, he took off the mask on his face. The silver light glided past, revealing half of his face. He exposed himself in front of her and looked at her stunned expression. He laughed self-deprecatingly. Now, do you still want to say what you just said? Yes, she had taken care of him. She had done what she should and shouldn't have done. He didn't reject her because in some ways, Zhang Yuanyuan was like Lianqiu. But now she wasn't like him. Lianqiu wouldn't show such a shocked and hurt expression. She would only hug him and tell him that she didn't mind. That was very character and not ugly at all. Qin Anlin put the mask back on and looked at Zhang Yuanyuan, who was still in a daze. He said calmly, Let's go out first. Zhang Yuanyuan came back to her senses and looked at Qin Anlin. She said instinctively, King, I'm not. But no matter how much he tried to defend himself, it was futile. After watching for a long time, she finally left. When he walked out, his legs were still trembling. He was still a little shocked. It was too scary, too scary. She really didn't know if she should continue. Qin Anlin got up, picked up his phone, and dialed a number. After a while, he got up, took his coat, and walked out. Zhang Yuanyuan looked down Not daring to ask where he was going, 2 hours later, Cheen Amlin was lying on the examination table of a private hospital. Kam also came over. Kam talked to the doctor, and then his eyes fell on Cheen Amlin. He was a little surprised. President Cheen had been quite resistant before. Why was he willing to have skin grafts now? After the examination, Cheen Amlin slowly sat up and spoke to Dr. York in fluent English. How many times do you need? Dr. York smiled. It should be less than 8 times. Kam frowned and looked at Cheen Amlin. But Cheen Amlin didn't mind. He nodded and made an appointment with Dr. York. After leaving the hospital, in the car, Kam looked sideways and asked, "When will President Cheen be admitted to the hospital?" Cheen Amlin smiled faintly. "Next week." Kam nodded. "Okay, I'll make the arrangements." Cheen Amlin smiled faintly and didn't say anything else. Kam would definitely tell Yuliancio. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.